Thanks for joining us today at another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and I'm so glad you've decided to tune in for another fabulous little half hour where we are going to talk all things motorsports, because we had a lot going on this weekend. We had NASCAR in Watkins Glen. We had the IndyCar series out in Portland. We had an IndyCar champion be crowned for the fourth time in their career. We also had some Supercars races, and we've got Formula One news and notes to break down as well. So that's all coming up today on this week's episode. But before we go ahead and get into things, be sure, if you like this show, to go ahead and follow me on social media. I'd really appreciate that. That helps me know if you like this show, and it helps me gauge how many people are out there watching this show. So go ahead and look up at rpeeters33. That's RPEETERS 33, and then you can give me a follow there. And then also be sure to be subscribed to WTHR on YouTube, and make sure to have that WTHR Plus app installed on your smart TV so that you can get the most recent episodes of the Racing Report as soon as they are posted. So all right, let's go ahead and move on in now into the Formula One news of the week. We won't waste any time. We'll go ahead and start right on in that. And this is very interesting. This was kind of cool that I read. Max Verstappen says he wants to compete in all of the major endurance races in every single form of motorsport. So that means IMSA, WEC, doesn't matter what it is, sports car, GT racing, he doesn't care. He wants to race in it. And he is apparently reportedly keeping an open mind regarding this new generation of Formula One car, and also Red Bull's relationship with Ford and what that could bring when Ford returns to Le Mans in the hyperclass next year. So definitely some interesting news to talk about there on Max Verstappen. I think it hasn't been a secret, really, that Verstappen would like to test the waters in other forms of motorsport. It definitely seems like he has an affinity for endurance racing and has seemingly expressed interest in running both the Daytona 24, the Le Mans 24, multiple other endurance races, possibly even the entire WEC's calendar. I don't know, but definitely some things to look forward to here, or at the very least, depending on how much of a Max Verstappen fan you are, definitely some things to keep an eye on going forward here in the next couple of years. Meanwhile, let's talk about this. Williams says they have reportedly stopped developing their F1 car for 2025 entirely. And now they've switched their development focus entirely to developing their 2026 car, with team principal James Vowles saying that he is willing to make this decision for the team's long-term future, even if it means giving up fifth place in the Constructors' Championship, because right now Williams is indeed in fifth place. And if that is what Vowles says he's willing to do, I think that we should see where that goes. Hopefully, maybe Williams will be a little bit better for next year. Bringing in a driver of Carlos Sainz's stature, I think, should have put them above and beyond. But I think their car was just still a little bit too behind the eight ball there. So maybe by now at this point, saying, okay, we're in the summer break. We're coming close to it. We've had a week now. They've decided, you know what? We're just going to focus on that 2026 car. There's no point right now in developing our 2025 car. We've got to start looking for 2026. And this is a common thing that happens usually in Formula One around this time. Teams that usually don't have a huge likelihood at winning the Constructors' Championship or even advancing and getting further up in the Constructors' standings, usually they start to focus their development time on the next season's car, which I think probably should suit Williams, especially given the huge regulation changes that are coming. You want to be on top of that. You don't really want to focus too much on the old regs when there's going to be such a huge revolution in terms of the technical specifications for next year's cars. Now let's also talk about this. This is a final piece of Formula One news before we move on into our next news topic. But more Formula One journalists are reporting that Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas will indeed be the drivers for the Cadillac F1 team beginning in 2026. Though nothing has been formally announced, these same journalists are also pointing to Mick Schumacher as a possibility. Now, again, I don't consider myself one of these F1 journalists because I'm not as inundated in the world of F1 as maybe I might be in the world of IndyCar or even NASCAR. But that being said, I still think it's important to talk about because this has been the long-standing rumor that these are going to be the two drivers that Cadillac wants. They want two veteran drivers who have a lot of experience racing in Formula One, who have race victories in Formula One to help lead that team. I think they're a lot more hesitant to take on a rookie or even an American driver than they would be to maybe grab a couple of veterans. Now, Mick Schumacher clearly is interested in racing for the Cadillac F1 team. He's been in talks. It looks like something's moving forward, but I think if you had to ask me, this is just my opinion. It's not bounded in really any facts. This is just based on what I think. Mick Schumacher might not be a bad choice for a reserve driver role, personally. I think that could go very well. I think that would benefit everybody there as well, having maybe a little bit of a younger driver on that side to maybe help. Also somebody who's been working with Mercedes the last couple of years. Maybe it could do well. I'm not going to completely rule it out as a positive factor yet, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Again, nothing formally announced. We still do not know for sure who's going to drive for Cadillac next year in Formula One, but it seems like more and more journalists now are reporting that it could very well indeed be Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas. But we will just have to see. Like I said, every time we talk about these news and rumors, as soon as we get confirmation on this, we will bring it to you right here on the Racing Report. But that is it for Formula One news for today. Let's go ahead and shift into the world of IndyCar. Because here's something we got to talk about for sure. This is very crazy. If you've seen any images coming out of the Milwaukee State Fair, the Wisconsin State Fair, I should say, over the weekend, you know that the Milwaukee Mile was flooded. Yeah, there was tons of standing water all over that track, but apparently IndyCar now says that they're not concerned. That flooding has subsided. It's gone away. If you saw pictures, it was mainly the infield that was suffering from substantial flooding damage. Not really damage, but just a lot of high standing water. But the series says the track isn't damaged. The track is fine. They've just maybe got to do a couple of little tweaks and repairs here and there with the infield. But otherwise, we should be good to go for next weekend's race at the Milwaukee Mile. So some good news there, especially since I think a lot of people were very nervous about what that race might look like if the flooding damage was maybe more extensive than it actually ended up being in. So good news there, at least for the IndyCar series. Now, let's talk about this. This is a very, very big topic of conversation within the IndyCar paddock, because prior to his win on Sunday, this was on Friday, Will Power was asked by Bob Pockrass, NASCAR reporter who's now covering IndyCar for Fox Sports, basically doing both, but now that Fox portion of the NASCAR schedule is done, Bob has been doing a lot more IndyCar lately. And on Friday, he caught Will Power and asked him, hey, do you know what's going on next year? Do you have any idea yet what your contract situation is like? And well, Will Power was pretty bleak and said, hey, I have no idea. He'd just like to know what he's doing for next year. He doesn't know if he's going to be racing for Team Penske. He doesn't know if he's going to be out of the series entirely. He doesn't know if he's going to be racing maybe even in Penske's sports car program. He just wants to know, and he doesn't know. And he's not expecting, at least according to what he told Bob Pockrass, is Will Power is just not expecting to know until after the season finale race at Nashville on August 31st. Now, something additionally that Will Power said in this interview was that, hey, he can't even talk to other teams until September 1st. So it's not until after August 31st, until the checkered flag flies at Nashville, is Will Power even going to know what his future might be. He doesn't know, and he'd just like to know, and he's very stressed and worried, and you could kind of see that when Power was discussing his contract situation, especially after his win on Sunday at Portland. Now, again, that interview happened before he won the race, and if you watched his winner's interview from Portland, it definitely did not look like a man who was looking at many more wins to come with Team Penske. It definitely seemed, at least by his demeanor, that this could have been his last win for Team Penske, which, if that's the case, I think personally would be insane. I think it's another situation of, hey, this is Roger Penske getting rid of a driver before they're past their prime, just before they're past the prime. Because remember, he did this with Helio Castroneves in 2017, where Castroneves won races and was still in contention to win the championship. But eventually, before that championship was decided and before Helio was even eliminated, Roger Penske said, hey, we're moving you and Juan Pablo Montoya to our new sports car program in 2018. Obviously, the rest is history. With as soon as Castroneves left, he went on to win his 4th Indy 500. So now it makes you wonder, what would Power even do? Where would Power go? Well, apparently the hot rumor is that Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing would like to have Will Power on their team. But whether or not that's going to happen is still up in the air. I think they will definitely need that, given where at least 2 of their cars are right now in the leaders' circle standings. Not very good. Devlin DeFrancesco, I believe, is below the cut line on that in that 30 car to earn that money. So maybe that would be good for at least RLL, but would it be good for Will Power? Clearly somebody who's proven all year. He is currently sixth in the championship. Meanwhile, Scott McLaughlin is, I believe, 11th or 12th. I think he's actually 12th in the championship. And Joseph Newgarden is back in 18th position. So arguably, Will Power is having the best season out of all of the Penske drivers, and he's probably going to be the one that's going to be kicked to the curb, which I think has a lot of IndyCar fans very upset, given how Will Power has been perceived over the last at least 15 years that he's been driving full-time in the IndyCar series. So definitely something to watch there as we get closer and closer to the end of the IndyCar season, finding out where Will Power will go next year. Very, very interesting news to follow there. And finally, the final piece of IndyCar news here before we take our first break of the show is that the series, according to Fox, received 708,000 viewers for Sunday's race at Portland. Now, this comes as it was the lead-out program for a LIV Golf tournament that actually went long, and that LIV Golf tournament did not by any means get good ratings, meaning it was a terrible lead-in program for IndyCar, but despite that, IndyCar still managed to get its average 700,000 viewership number, which for whatever reason has just been the standard number. I mean, not to say it's like a terrible number, because I think according to Racer at least, or according to Fox or whoever put the statistic out, it was up compared to like 300,000 viewers from last year's race, which was on USA. So, I mean, I guess, yes, that is an increase, but we're still not seeing viewership numbers in the at least low 900,000 or at least the very low 1 million range, which we're seeing out of the NASCAR Xfinity Series on a weekly basis. And that is a series as well that has every single race broadcast on over-the-air television. You don't need a cable subscription in order to watch NASCAR Xfinity Series races or IndyCar races this year. So to see Xfinity still beating out IndyCar is kind of surprising, but again, I'm just curious to see what Fox does going forward when it comes to promotion, and hopefully maybe if we can get those numbers up from 700,000 to maybe 800,000, then try and get that up to 900,000, then I think we might be on a good upward trend there. But right now, it just seems to be stagnating around at the 700,000 mark. So on that note, let's go ahead and take a break now. This will be our first break of the show. And when we come back, we're going to discuss the news of the Supercars and the news out of the world of the NASCAR series. So do not go anywhere. You are watching The Racing Report. And we're back on The Racing Report. Thanks so much for staying tuned with us. My name is Rob Peeters. Let's go ahead and jump now into the world of supercars from down under, because we did have a supercars race over the weekend that we will talk about coming up later on in the show. But the news that we must discuss today is that 3-time supercar champion Craig Lowndes has signed a 2-year deal to drive for Team 18 next season in a wild card entry. So next season and then in 2027 as well. Super Cheap Auto, who is sponsoring him currently in supercars during his endurance races and in his wildcard entries, will follow Lowndes to Team 18. And this is, again, remembering Team 18 is becoming the official GM homologation team as Triple Eight Racing, where Craig Lowndes is departing, which is a team that he has not left in decades. And he has been a part of that team for the last several decades. He's leaving. And so he will be going to Team 18 as 888 Racing switches to Ford for next year. So that is your update there on the world of supercars. Craig Lowndes, we know where he's going next year. He announced earlier this year that he was not going to return to 888 Racing when they made their switch to Ford. But we do know now that we will see Craig Lowndes in a supercar for 888 Racing next year. Not just it's interesting that it says wild card, which means this doesn't just mean a co-driver in an endurance race. We could see Craig Lowndes go out there in some event that is a standard supercars event. So be very interested to see what comes out of that news. Very, very interesting, but that did drop over the weekend, so I'm glad we got to talk about it. Now let's shift gears now into the world of NASCAR, coming back stateside, I guess, from going down under. Let's talk first of all about Connor Zilisch. Now, if you haven't seen this video, maybe don't look it up because it's kind of gnarly. I mean, knowing what we know now, it's probably fine, but it was a gnarly spill. Connor Zilisch slipped and fell in victory lane after his Xfinity Series win at Watkins Glen on Saturday, but he announced that he's had successful surgery to repair his collarbone, which he broke in that fall. Now, while the Xfinity Series is indeed off this weekend, they won't be back until Daytona, there's still no timetable for his return. Now, remember, Trackhouse had to withdraw him from the Cup race that he was scheduled to compete in. In fact, he qualified 25th for that Cup race, but Trackhouse had to withdraw him because obviously he's got a broken collarbone. Now, something that's interesting here is that Shane Van Gisbergen has driven and won a race in supercars with a broken collarbone before, and so it seems like he's given him his young teammate there some tips and tricks on how to overcome that collarbone injury, which is nice to see given the fact that those two did tangle during that race at Watkins Glen, in which Zilisch tapped SVG coming into the final turn, that turn 7, and SVG went out around into the wall, ending his day. Obviously, Zilisch went on to win that race, but still very interesting. We'll have to see what that expectation is. Now, Zilisch could get a waiver and miss the final 3 races and then be able to come back for the playoffs in the Xfinity Series. So that's a possibility. But we'll just have to see what Trackhouse decides and what Junior Motorsports decides to do going forward with that. So now let's talk about the next piece of motorsports news. And it also includes Shane Van Gisbergen, because just before he won that Cup race, at Watkins Glen on Sunday, Trackhouse Racing announced it has signed Shane Van Gisbergen to a multi-year contract extension that, with even Justin Marks going on to say that he expects SVG to make a deep run in the playoffs. So basically calling SVG shot there as his own team owner. So we'll see what comes out of that as we go forward, as just 2 races left until the Cup Series playoff cutoff. So obviously, I think we know SVG's already seated quite high in the playoffs right now. But what's he going to do through that first round? Because if he can survive that first round, the round of 12 has the Roval in it. And if he can win at least on the Roval, that gets him into the round of 18. His best oval apparently is Martinsville. We'll see. We'll see. I'm just saying, we'll see. It could be very interesting. Meanwhile, let's talk about some NASCAR lawsuit news. This is big news because on Friday, August 8th, NASCAR filed a motion saying that 2311 and FRM should show why they shouldn't be sanctioned for what NASCAR alleges was them coordinating with drivers, representatives, and sponsors to send emails with concerns that the teams might not be chartered. Now, on Monday, August 11th, a federal judge denied NASCAR's motion. So that's the most recent news update that we have there. Just, again, more back and forth within the courts, filing motions, judges either approving or denying the motions. But as of right now, we're still expecting a December trial for this. So as soon as that happens, believe me, it's not going to be a quiet off season on this show. We're going to get a lot of updates, but believe me. So, but just keep ahead watching for that as we get them. Next piece of news here in the world of the Truck Series, the NASCAR Truck Series. Spire Motorsports has released Andres Perez de Lara from the number 77 truck, and as a result, they will shut down the number 07 truck and shift those owners' points to the number 77 team, which will now be driven by Corey LaJoie for the remainder of the season. Now, it's not all bad for Perez de Lara there, because he signed with Nice Motorsports to take over truck number 45, while Bailey Curry will move to the number 45 truck. which was Caden Honeycutt's truck, who, by the way, as we mentioned last week, he's going to drive for Halmar Friesen Racing for the rest of the season. Hopefully, if he can get into the playoffs, both him and that 52 truck will run for a title in both the drivers and the owners championship. Speaking of Halmar Friesen Motorsports, they've announced a second driver for their 62 truck coming up in Bristol next month. Canadian super late model driver Cole Butcher will drive that number 62 truck at Bristol on September 11th. So that is it for the world of NASCAR news. Thanks so much for sticking with us so far through this show. But coming up on the show, we've got to recap all of the races that happened this past weekend and then get you ready for the NASCAR races that are coming up this weekend in Richmond. So do not go anywhere. You are watching the Racing Report. And welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. I'm so glad you've stuck around through these commercial breaks. Let's talk about the races that happened over the weekend. Obviously, we already touched on Shane van Gisbergen winning his fourth Cup Series race of 2025 over the weekend at Watkins Glen. He did so by beating the guy who beat him last year, Chris Buescher, by 11 seconds. An absolute curb stomping of the field, basically. Absolutely just dog walked that field. Nobody disagrees. I think that SVG sure has these road courses figured out. And again, let's not forget, these Cup cars are quite similar. It's not a one-to-one similarity, but they are quite similar to what SVG has driven basically his entire career up until this point. They are very similar to an Australian supercar. So it's not really surprising to see SVG be able to quite literally whip the field the way he's doing it. But at the same time, I think a lot of people were quite frustrated with the way the car drove and handled. And again, there's a lot more talk about just this dirty air happening in the Cup Series with this next-gen car. The teams kind of figuring things out, that parity kind of being gone away by the wayside that we had when this car first launched in 2022. Now everything is just kind of blah. And the recent Jeff Gluck polls kind of show that. And it's not surprising to me. So I'm curious to see what we see this weekend at Richmond. Again, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But not a bad race on the Cup side, but definitely one that probably could have been a lot better had some of that dirty air, some of those dirty air issues been ironed out or maybe had been fixed by now. But I digress. Meanwhile, in the Xfinity Series, as we mentioned, Connor Zilisch, before he injured himself, won his sixth race of the year. And as I said, he did kind of take out his Junior Motorsports and Trackhouse Racing teammate, Shane van Gisbergen, in order to win that race. But he did have to survive an overtime finish as well before he was able to complete that win. In the Truck Series, it was Corey Heim time again. Just set your watch there for a little Heim time, because I think this is just what we're going to get. I'll be so surprised if Corey Heim does not win this title. And if he doesn't win the title, it'll be because he got robbed of it in something else. He should have had at least 2 Truck Series titles by now, but unfortunately he doesn't because of the one race to determine a championship deal. Hopefully that doesn't happen this year, because he's had one heck of a season, and he showed again. I mean, just Corey Heim, I mean, surely he's going to go. He's supposed to make his another Cup start this weekend at Richmond as well for 2311. So just dude's having one heck of a season in the Truck Series, just trying to move up, trying to get into that next level of NASCAR, because I don't think anybody doubts that he has the talent. It's just, why has he not moved up? Clearly, he's proven that he's okay. I think he's been better than Riley Herbst, his teammate at 2311, in the select Cup starts that he's had, compared to Herbst, who's been there the entire season. That's not necessarily a knock on Riley Herbst. I'm just kind of comparing things here. It looks like Heim might be ready for Cup Series, to go straight from truck to Cup. We'll see. I don't know. But let's talk about the IndyCar Series. Again, as we talked about, Will Power claimed his first IndyCar Series victory of 2025. And not only was it Will Power's first win of the year, it was also Team Penske's. Team Penske had not won a race all season. In fact, they've had the worst season, I think, since 1999 in their season. And the only difference between 1999 and 2025, is that Will Power won a race. Nobody won a race for Penske in 99. Will Power's won a race now, so at least they've got that going for them. At least they could say it's not as bad as 1999. Of course, I don't think anything would be bad at 1999, especially when you get to the last handful of races there. Where, I don't want to talk about it. If you know, you know, and I don't need to talk about it. But it's good for Team Penske to finally get over that hump, get that race victory. But again, as we talked about before we went to break, this could be Will Power's last race in IndyCar. And honestly, I don't know what to think about that. I don't know how to make of that. And especially when you look at what Will Power has done over the course of the season, he has hands down been the best Penske driver out of the entire organization. And I say that in IndyCar and NASCAR. Maybe not so much in IMSA, but at the very least in IndyCar and NASCAR, Will Power has been the lone bright spot of Team Penske so far this year. Yes, okay, Penske's got wins with Cintric. They got 3 wins each. Logano's got a win. Blaney's got a win. Cintric's got a win. Yeah, okay, that's all good and fine. But when you look at what their IndyCar program's looking like, Will Power, hands down, has been the lone bright spot. Again, he is 6th in points, which is something that I think should not be ignored, especially considering that we don't know where he's going to race next year, if he's going to race next year in IndyCar at all. But as that happened, Alex Palou, what am I talking about? Alex Palou won his 4th career IndyCar Series championship. He clinched it, basically. He hasn't formally won it. He'll be given the Astor Cup. If he's not given the Astor Cup at the end of Milwaukee, he should have been given the Astor Cup at the end of Portland, but hopefully he's at least presented with it by Nashville. That's his 4th career IndyCar Series victory, his 3rd consecutive IndyCar championship within the last, what is that now? 5 years? 5 years? So yeah, he's got 4 championships, Power 1. That's the other thing. Hey, Will Power's the only other guy to have won a championship outside of Alex Palou since 2021. But anyway, all these things are moving in. But good for Alex Palou. Obviously, he is a generational talent, and I think we all have to just sit back and, again, appreciate what we're seeing. Yes, I know it can get kind of boring watching the same guy win over and over again. But if you look at it and it kind of shift your perspective a little bit. Look at it from the perspective of we're watching history here. We are watching something that may never be done again. Or if it's ever done again, it might not happen for another 20, 30 years. This is just something that does not happen every day, especially in a spec series like IndyCar is now. Alex Palou, a dominant season, 8 race victories, his 4th career series title, and I don't think he's done. I think he could absolutely get 2 more, maybe even 3 more before the end of the decade, and probably become the winningest the driver with the most IndyCar championships. He could surpass Scott Dixon, his own teammate, in doing that. It would not surprise me, but he still has to prove that. So we have to see what happens coming up next year and the year after that, and if anybody can usurp Alex Palou in IndyCar. Now let's talk about, very briefly, let's go on through some of the other races that happened this weekend. Supercars was in Queensland. They returned to Queensland Raceway. It was the first time in a couple of years for them there. Brock Feeney won race 1 and then race 3, while his teammate Will Brown won race 2. So it was an all Triple Eight racing weekend out there in Queensland. And then in Super Formula has 2 events left, 4 races total, but 2 events left. And here's what happened. Red Bull Junior driver Ayumu Iwasa won his first ever Super Formula race over the weekend in Sugo. Now, here's what the point. I've told everybody about this Super Formula point standings. There's 4 races to go. 2 events, 4 races. Iwasa trails Sho Suboi by 5 points. So if there's ever a reason to maybe catch a Super Formula race, if you're up late, maybe you got a crying baby, or maybe you just get home from a long night's day or something, you can't fall asleep, what have you, maybe it might be time in October to flip on a Super Formula race, because that championship battle is going to get real, real good. Iwasa is coming into his own. He's outside of the races that he's finished, because I think he's DNF'd at least 2 or 3 races, but he's only finished on the podium. And this was his first victory. So he's very close to Sho Suboi, who has very similar statistics to him in terms of the races he's finished. He's either been on the podium or winning. So very interesting championship fight going on over in Japan in the Super Formula Series. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the races that are coming up this weekend. We've got just NASCAR. As of right now, I mean, obviously there are other races going on across the world and across this country, but in terms of the major racing series that we cover on this program, it's just NASCAR. NASCAR Cup Series and the Truck Series will be in Richmond. The Truck race is scheduled for Friday night, while the Cup race is scheduled for Saturday night. It'll be a Saturday night race in the Cup Series. Also, next week's race will also be a Saturday race, because it'll be at Daytona, which is traditionally that second race is a Saturday night race. So got a nice little streak of Saturday night races going here in the NASCAR Cup Series. So looking forward to those. I always like a nice night race. I miss when certain races like at Richmond were always Saturday night races. I'd like to see NASCAR go back to that in the future and make sure Richmond is permanently a Saturday night race, preferably. But as that said, here's what's some of the races that are coming up later on this month. IndyCar is, like I said, off until August 24th when they come back at Milwaukee. The Formula One summer break is still happening, but they will return August 31st at Zandvoort for the Dutch Grand Prix. Supercars is going to take about a month off. They're going to return September 12th through the 14th at the Bend. That'll be a 500-kilometer race. And then the next IMSA race is coming up here in a couple weeks' time as well. They're going to Virginia International Raceway on August 24th. And then, as I mentioned, the next Super Formula race is not for a while. It's not until October 11th and 12th. That's 2 races at Fuji Speedway. So a lot of things to look forward to. Maybe not so much this week if you're not a NASCAR fan, but still races to look forward to. Championship battles that are heating up. Obviously not in IndyCar, but hey, there's still 2 race victories to be decided on ovals, which I think will be very interesting to see who can maybe get those out. Could it be Alex Palou? Could he get maybe a 9th or even a 10th race victory in 2025? Or will somebody else go out there and get a victory? Could Joseph Newgarden finally return to victory lane? I don't know. We'll find out. I'm very curious to see what the future holds here for the final 2 IndyCar races. But that is it for this week's show. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in this week. We really appreciate it. Make sure, if you haven't already, hit that follow button on my own personal social media pages. Make sure you've got that WTHR Plus app installed on your smart TV. Make sure you're subscribed to WTHR on YouTube. And make sure you're just enjoying the races, because that's what I love doing. I love coming out here and talking to you guys all things motorsports. So for WTHR Plus, thanks again so much for watching. My name is Rob Peeters, and this has been another episode of The Racing Report.